Atla Palani Nest Tender versus Vilis, Broker of Blood, Erebos, God of the Dead, and Golos, Tireless Pilgrim, some very powerful commanders at the table, and this commander is hot off the presses. Literally just finished building the deck, so I have no idea how well this is going to turn out. Well, Erebos is getting off to a really quick start. A Sol Ring, followed straight into a Jet Medallion. So it's very likely that we'll be seeing Erebos next turn. I don't think there's any life gain in our deck, so we're not as worried about Erebos as we might be otherwise. An Imperial Seal coming down for Vilis. And as good as Golos and Erebos are, I think Vilis is the one to be really scared of. Golos is easy to underestimate, but Vilis is really good no matter what you do, really. Alright, that is excellent. I was hoping for a green source for that Sylvan Library. So let's grab ourselves a Tiger and we can go into a Sol Ring ourselves. Wouldn't normally play a turn 1 Sol Ring, but if Erebos is playing Sol Rings as well, then we will certainly try and keep up with them. And there we go. I don't think I've ever seen so many turn 1 Sol Rings in a game, so hopefully the Vilis player went for a Sol Ring off of the Imperial Seal. Followed by Demonic Tutor. Wow, we are really getting off to the races here. It's only the first turn 2 of the game and we've already seen 2 tutors. Playing out a Myriad Landscape as well, which can no doubt get some swamps out of our opponent's library next turn. And there we go, yeah, I'm thinking that Imperial Seal went for a Sol Ring, so we are all on an even playing field now. Looks like this is going to be a fast game. And the third tutor of the game, yeah, this Vilis had one hell of a hand, 2 tutors in hand. Unless they just top-decked into the Demonic Tutor, they've already gotten an Imperial Seal off, don't forget. I found that Vilis decks in multiplayer are often built like the 1 vs 1 Grizzlebrand decks, in that they want to ramp like crazy and get into their commander as soon as possible. Alright, it may be that they went for the Sensei's top to filter their draws. Smothering Tithe isn't awful. Yeah, let's get down the Smothering Tithe. My aim was to go for the Sylvan Library this turn, but I'm happy to get down Smothering Tithe as soon as possible. Getting our first treasure token from Golos. They are obviously deciding not to keep us off mana this early in the game, and decide to dump down a Tireless Tracker, followed by landfall into a Clue token. And I would imagine Erebos would want to crack the Myriad Landscape for 2 mana this turn, so probably not going into Smothering Tithe. Although they might be able to drop down a swamp, and in that case they would be able to crack Myriad Landscape and pay for this, but they decide not to either way. Cracking the Myriad Landscape for those 2 swamps. Clearly our opponent didn't make a land drop there, so it's a good job they had the Myriad Landscape. And Vilis did not go for a spin of the top before they drew there. So clearly they are eager to get something specific going. Yeah, that's more ramp with a Gilded Lotus. Have an Austere command in the deck, but yeah, I don't have anything else of note. We can't get down to Karma already, can we? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We are 1 away. Let's go for our commander here, I think. The Vilis might have some removal held up. We'll just name Dinosaur off of this because we can get additional coloured mana from the treasures. Going straight in for our commander. And we'll get down a Swiftfoot Boots. And we will equip the Swiftfoot Boots. And now next turn, assuming that we don't get a treasure token, we will be able to activate Atla and put an egg token into play. And that should give us a nice bit of wrath protection. Would be really nice to have Seedball Muse in play as well, because then this would untap every turn. Golos debating whether or not to pay into Smothering Tithe here, and they opt not to. They did tap down the Sol Ring, so they were thinking about it. But it might just be that they're going in for their Golos here. We are Dinosaur Tribal in this deck, by the way, as Zakama and Otapek Huntmaster might suggest. I was just going to go for Atla Naya value, but wanted to do a dinosaur deck for quite a while, so decided to go with Dinosaur Tribal this time round. Been planning to make Gishath for the longest time, but never got round to it, so this can be our Naya Dinosaur Tribal deck. Might make Gishath as well at some point. Golos hunting for a land, but they just decide to do some fixing with a command tower. That is nowhere near the worst thing that our opponent could have gone for out of their library. And yeah, they are very wisely not swinging in at us. We could make an egg token in response and then block with it, and who knows what we would polymorph into. I want to hold off on making an egg anyway, because the longer we have Wrath protection, the better. Our opponent deciding to pay into the Smothering Tithe, and that just takes 2 mana away from them for their turn. They might not make use of that mana anyway, and hence the reason they paid that. Erebos is only going to cost them 3 mana. It looks like Erebos is what they're casting. Nope, Kalitas, Traitor of Get. Yeah, we don't really have any graveyard interaction. We have an Eternal Witness, and that's about it. Yeah, I'd rather Kalitas wasn't in play, but not going to worry too much about it because we don't have mass graveyard reanimation. Our opponent may well want to cast a Wrath of God, and that might be why Kalitas is in here. Vilis now spinning the top before they draw, and then deciding to draw into a card at the end step. Now, that's curious. They might have a Go for the Throat or something they want to use, or maybe it's a Vampiric Tutor, and they want to definitely draw into something next turn. Okay, I'm not sure what our opponent's doing there. They drew into a card off of the Sensei's top, and now all they're going to do is draw into the top. So, as far as I can tell, they might as well have just left the top in play. I don't really know what our opponent's aim was there. A Deserted Temple. Yeah, that's running most mono black decks. Can untap a Cabal Coffers. Our opponent can afford their Vilis now. Going for an Ether Flux Reservoir. That's a combo piece if ever I saw one. Yeah, wouldn't mind getting rid of the Ether Flux Reservoir sooner rather than later. And out comes that Sensei's top again that our opponent drew into. 2 cards left in their hand. Then deciding to spin the top in their second main phase. They've still got 3 mana held up from the Lotus. And again deciding to draw a card, so clearly they've seen something on top that they're desperate for. And they're going to have to pay into the Tithe unless, nope, they're just going to give us another treasure token. Going for Sensei's top does count as a tap ability. And they need to be careful with that tap ability because you can respond by destroying the top. And that's one of the only times you can actually get rid of top. There is a Toxic Deluge. So let's make an egg in response to that. The egg will die to Toxic Deluge and we'll get a free creature. I've never actually seen what the eggs look like. So now, let's see what we can rip into. Atla will trigger when she sees an egg die, and we will get a creature. We just so happen to get into the biggest creature in the deck, a 12/12 with Trample. For free is not bad. I think our opponent might have made it worse. Now, I'm very wary of the Golos player over there not getting any attention, but I think we need to get rid of Vilis as soon as we can. And as much as I would love to get down the Sylvan Library, I think it makes more sense for us to go for our commander whilst everyone is tapped out. Put the boots straight onto our commander again. And if anyone has spot removal, they are welcome to use it on Galta, Primal Hunger. And a Yarrick the Desecrated coming down. Yeah, that's pretty scary. Really like this commander from M20. Made a Lands Matter version of it recently, actually, and it's my favourite version of that deck. Our opponent did give us a treasure token, by the way. Hopefully we'll get another one here, because that will mean that it's another egg token for us. Let's see if the Erebos player continues to play it safe. They've got 6 cards in hand, and they do give us a treasure token, so that's another egg counter for us. Yeah, Erebos may also be sitting back, waiting for everyone else to be taken out. Just playing a slow methodical game, it looks like. And Erebos, God of the Dead, comes down. And deciding to draw a card for 2 life and 2 mana, and back up to 7. And they cannot afford to keep us off a treasure token there. Smothering Tithe has done a hell of a lot of work for us this game, and it's a good job we got into it because we haven't seen any of our ramp. Okay, a Mana Crypt. So they can activate Erebos again here if they want to. And they do decide to draw another card. So that will be yet another treasure token for us. And we may be going for Zakama next turn. It's good that our opponents are tapping out. I'll see what the Vilis player does. I'd quite like to get rid of the Aetherflux Reservoir, although it might be better to get rid of the Gilded Lotus. And we can get rid of Gilded Lotus with a Zakama, if we manage to hardcast that. I actually cut the Scroll Rack from this deck, because if you get into big creatures like Zakama, a Scroll Rack would put it back on top of your library, and you could do that in response to a Wrath or someone swinging in at you, block with an egg token and get a free Zakama out of the deal. But I cut Scroll Rack just at the last second, and I don't know if that was the right decision or not. We are up to 5 treasure tokens at the beginning of Vilis' turn. Let's see if we actually manage to see Vilis here. It might be worth them getting into their commander, because if we hit them with Galta, they're going to draw a boatload of cards. And that's exactly what they do. Now, Vilis is black, pay 2 life and -1/-1. Yeah, they can only do that once, so I think it's going to be safe to take the boots off of our Atla. Yeah, if we need to do that, then that is going to be pretty safe, I think. There is 1 CMC black removal that could get rid of our commander, so it is something that we need to consider carefully before we do it. We'll make an egg at the end of our opponent's turn. Okay, Forerunner of the Empire. We can search for a dinosaur and put it on top of our library. What do we want to do here? We've still only got 8 mana. I think it's finally time to get down our Sylvan Library, because we really need to start hitting our lands. And then we'll go in for Forerunner of the Empire as well, and we'll be able to search our library for a dinosaur and put it on top. And I think with a Vilis in play, the thing to go for is Zetalpa. Yeah, I think that's pretty safe. Yeah, let's go for Zetalpa. Now, the question is, do we go in for 12 damage at Vilis? I don't think that's very wise, because they're going to untap with a lot of mana. Let's concentrate a little bit on Erebos. I would like to swing in at Golos, but they have a Death Toucher in the way. So we will just go in at Erebos here. Blocking with the zombie. And just taking 10 here. Golos coming out again, and they will be able to search for 2 lands here, thanks to the Yarok, the Desecrated, being in play. That doubles up your ETB effects of your permanents. And what's this land that they've already got? Ah, this must be Gate Tribal then. Well, haven't seen any gates so far though. Yeah, so I'm assuming it's Gate Tribal. We may well see the Maze's End here. And there it is. So definitely a Gate Tribal deck. They've got some searching to do though. I think it's 10 gates they need. Yes, 10 gates, and I think there's only 11 gates in the game. Learnt that from a recent outing with Golos. And a Field of the Dead as well. Yeah, this is some kind of Lands Matter deck. Field of the Dead is really good, and it is active. So there's about to be a whole heap of zombies coming into play. In this instance, Field of the Dead reads, whenever a land comes into play, you get a zombie, and that's actually 2 zombies when Yarok's in play. It's exactly the tactic that we go for in our Lands Matter deck with Yarok. Getting Field of the Dead out with Prime Time, which is unbanned in 1 vs 1. Erebos deciding to draw a card to Erebos' ability. So we're getting more treasure tokens here. We're up to 5 now. And I'm just thinking, if we're going to hardcast Sakama next turn, I was thinking whether to blow up the Reservoir or the Gilded Lotus. I think I'll go for Gilded Lotus because our opponent can't gain life thanks to the Erebos. Erebos is searching for what is most likely a Cabal Coffers here. They did go for the Cabal Coffers. Let's just make sure that that is definitely what they went for. They didn't already have that in hand. That Coffers will generate 4 mana currently, so they can tap down 3 lands to generate 4 mana. And obviously Cabal Coffers will get better the more swamps our opponent puts out. Oh, a Sangromancer, that is a really good one. And our opponent can gain life. Yes, it's your opponents can't gain life, so our opponent can certainly take advantage of the Sangromancer. Whenever an opponent discards a card, you can gain 3 life. And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you can gain 3. We are planning on having eggs die, so yeah, we might have another threat at the table here. Yaheni is going to be a problem as well, because that's often an indestructible creature. I think they need to sacrifice a creature to make it indestructible, though. Yeah, and they're not going to sacrifice their Sangromancer, I wouldn't have thought. The problem is if they get into something like a Grave Pact. Going for -1/-1 onto the Galter, and they have to pay 2 life for that, so they draw 2 cards, which means we get more treasure tokens. I think we need to... Yeah, we desperately need to get Vilis out of this game. Problem is, we need Vilis out of play before we swing in with big scary dinosaurs, preferably. And Arcana Revenant, well, that's a nice bit of ramp for our opponent. Whenever you tap a swamp, you get an additional black. So that's 6 mana they've got available to them now. Yeah, our opponents have really pulled ahead on mana. From a land perspective, it's just Smothering Tithe that's keeping us in this game. Luckily, we're up against 2 black opponents, so it's only Golos we have to worry about getting rid of our Smothering Tithe, really. Playing another swamp, so they've got 8 mana available to them now. Ooh, Bolas' Citadel. Yeah, that is a really nice combination of cards. Luckily, our opponent has the Erebos in play, but our opponent is going to be able to draw a lot of cards to the Bolas' Citadel. You can play the top card of your library, but you have to pay life equal to the CMC to do so. And don't forget, whenever Vilis loses life, they draw that many cards. And it's a really good combination with the Etherflux Reservoir. In fact, you can often play your entire deck, or play cards off the top until you hit a land at least. So that is definitely something to consider. Let's make another egg. And then Sylvan Library will trigger. We will always yes and yield to that. And we want to put Zetalpa back on top, because if we plan on sacrificing some eggs to the Ashnod's altar, yeah, I think keeping hold of the Fiery Confluence and the Krosan Grip is a good idea. Oh, I missequenced that. I just paid 8 life to keep these 2 cards, and I should have paid 4 life for the Krosan Grip and then put this on top, and we would have got the Fiery Confluence for free. Ugh, yeah, that feels bad. Alright, well in this case, why don't we go for Fiery Confluence to blow up some artifacts. Yeah, I think that's alright. Fiery Confluence is good for Enrage in this deck, but we have the Forerunner of the Empire. Oh, it is a May ability, so yeah, we could rely on that if we wanted to. I was worried about killing off our own commander, but that is a May ability. When a dinosaur enters, 1 damage to each creature. So in that case, let's go for 2 damage to each creature, and we'll blow up that Bolas' Citadel. That way we get rid of some zombies, we hopefully get rid of the Yaheni, and they might even sacrifice the Sangromancer. I would think they would want to keep the Sangromancer in play because they'll gain some life from creatures dying here. We don't have any Enrage on the field currently. Okay, yep, just deciding to let the Yaheni die. And they're going to gain 3 life 4 times here, which is 12 life for any of you that are not mathematicians. And then Yaheni saw a couple of eggs die there, so we will not get into Zatalpa thanks to my mistake earlier. We do get into a Burning Sun's avatar though. That will trigger the Forerunner of the Empire. We do not want to use that ability. 1 damage onto everything would get rid of our Forerunner and our Atla. We want to deal 3 damage to the Golos player and the Yarok, I think. Yeah, I'd like to get rid of Sangromancer, but Yarok's better here, I think. That's going to be a tougher creature to get rid of, for us at least. Sangromancer will see that the Yarok has died and gained 3 life again. We do not want to deal 1 damage to everything, and then we'll see what we get into off of Atla here. Oh, getting into the Marauding Raptor. Whenever another creature enters under your control, it deals 2 damage to it. And if a dinosaur is dealt damage this way, the Marauding Raptor gets +2/+0. That's an Enrage enabler. So we've got a couple in play now. We'll get down the Ashnod's Altar so that we can get rid of an egg whenever we want. And it really feels bad sitting back and letting Vilis do whatever he wants, but I really don't want to hit him for 12. Because that's going to be a bunch of cards in hand, and I think he can take it and leave Vilis in play is the problem. So I'm going to go in at Erebos again. See if we can get rid of the Sangromancer. Yeah, I really wish we'd gotten the Zatalpa off the top there. Sylvan Library is now banned in 1 versus 1, so it's very seldom that I play with that card. Very wisely deciding not to block with the Sangromancer. Just going to take a hit for 12 here, and then that is our turn done. Vilis is deciding to aim the minus ability at Sangromancer. I think that's a very good call. And Vilis drawing 2 cards there. And because Vilis draws 2 cards, we get even more tithe triggers. So it's looking like we're going to have enough to make an egg and go for a Cross and Grip as well if we want to. And I forgot they get 2 black from the swamp, so they're also going to aim at our Forerunner of the Empire. Actually not too worried about that now that we have the Marauding Raptor in play. But no doubt our opponent is just trying to get rid of some creatures and draw some cards. See, they're all the way up to 7 now. Yeah, and our opponent allowed the Forerunner to die before the Sangromancer, so they will gain 3 life there. But at least we got a lot of treasure tokens out of the deal. But very, very worried about Vilis having so many cards in hand. Haven't really seen any removal this game. Golos going for the first activation of the game. Let's see what they managed to get out. Oh, it's just... yeah, Tireless Tracker is not what was revealed there. There's a gate on top. I don't know if they've made a land this turn, actually. They can only make 1 land drop a turn, but they can make them off of Golos. And there they go, in for their first gate. Only 9 more to go. That will trigger Field of the Dead, so they'll get into a zombie there. Yeah, pretty unlucky for our opponent, but at least they cleared some lands off the top, which they don't necessarily want to draw into. And they get into a Sylvan Library, so that is pretty scary with Golos. I think that's actually worth a Cross and Grip. We'll wait until the end of Vilis' turn, because God knows what he's going to do. But I don't like our opponent stacking the top cards of their library with a Golos in play. A Diabolic Tutor for Erebos. And we'll see if they're going after a board wipe here. They may well do, because we have targeted Erebos a little bit, but it was only really because of the Yarok that had Death Touch and not wanting to hit Vilis for a lot of damage. Now, I'm not particularly eager to get rid of Erebos. In fact, I'd like to keep him around because he keeps Vilis from gaining life. And therefore is switching off the Aetherflux Reservoir. Okay, a Necromancy. There's Kalitas. Can you get anything from any graveyard? Yeah, they can grab a card from any graveyard here. There's a Yarok. And I don't think we have anything noteworthy. Yeah, so I don't think we necessarily have to worry about necromancy. We have a Krosan Grip held up for that anyway. Okay, going for their Sangromancer. It might be that they go for Sangromancer and then wipe the board, because then they will gain plenty of life. Living Death is what their aim is. Well, we've got Ashnod's Altar in play, so that's not necessarily the worst thing for us. Let's make an egg before that goes off. The Marauding Raptor will deal 2 damage to the egg, and the Sangromancer will see that and gain 3 life. Atla will see it, and there's a mirror entity. Now then, if we're going to... yeah, we could get some stuff going here, actually. Alright, let's make our commander go into the bin. And then, in response to the Marauding Raptor, we'll activate our mirror entity. Our creatures are going to die anyway, so we might as well activate the mirror entity. And this will give all of our creatures every creature type, including egg. And we're going to do it for 0, making them all a 0/0. And the mirror entity does resolve. Because mirror entity made all of our creatures into eggs, the Atla will see those as dying, and we will get some triggers off of her. Alright, we get into a Sliver-clad Ferocidons, a Polyraptor, a Trapjaw Tyrant, an Eternal Witness. I don't know what we want to grab with that, actually. We're just going to go for the Bloodstained Mire. Haven't made any lands this game, really. This is all off the back of the Smothering Tithe. And then the last one is a Goring Ceratops. Now, unfortunately, Sangromancer is going to gain even more life here, because we're going to have to sacrifice all these things to the Ashnod's Altar. We'll sacrifice them to the Ashnod's Altar so that we'll get them back off of the Living Death, and we'll have a bigger board state than we actually started with. Not going to make use of all this mana, unfortunately. Yeah, and there's Erebos up to 54 life. Might have been worth going for the Necromancy, going after Necromancy with the Krosan Grip, but I don't really like going after it when there's things like Sylvan Library and Aetherflux in play. Perhaps should have done that though. And now a heap of triggers to consider. The Burning Sun's Avatar, the Eternal Witness can grab back the Fiery Confluence, that's an easy one. Then there's some Forerunner of the Empires. We're going to be able to get Enrage on the Trapjaw Tyrant to get rid of some of our opponent's stuff. And in fact, with all this mana, we can make our creatures really huge, can't we? So we don't have to worry about damage being dealt to Mirror Entity and getting rid of that. Now the Marauding Raptor triggers are on the stack. We'll just put the Forerunner of the Empire on the stack, and then I'm going to make everything huge with that floating mana from the Ashnod's Altar and the Mirror Entity. And then everything should survive all the damage that's going to be dealt to it here. I do want to get some Enraged triggers on the go, so I just want to make sure everything survives. We'll point 3 damage at Vilis, and 3 damage at the Yahenni. Now in response to the Forerunner of the Empire, going to put this floating 10 mana into the Mirror Entity, and that will make everything into 10/10s. And now we can feel free to go for damage onto our stuff. Let's say yes and get some Enraged triggers going. We get a Trapjaw Tyrant. Let's exile the Yarok. We get a Polyraptor trigger and a Silver-clad Ferocidons trigger. So all of our opponents will have to sacrifice a permanent. Yeah, our opponent's just working out there that they're in a pretty dire situation. What's going to happen here is that the silver-clad Ferocidons is going to be dealt a lot of damage by our own creatures, Enrage Enablers. And whenever that happens, each opponent has to sacrifice a permanent. It's kind of like a Grave Pact on legs. And this can take, obviously, up to 10 damage before it dies. So that's 10 permanents our opponents have to sacrifice. Kind of like a Super Annihilator. Yeah, two opponents decide to scoop there because they are pretty much going to have to get rid of all their permanents. Let's see if we can play this out any longer. The Vilis player decided to get rid of the Deserted Temple. We get another Forerunner of the Empire trigger from a Polyraptor entering. So we'll say yes to that. We want to have our opponent sacrifice all their permanents here just to ensure victory. And we've actually got Infinite here as well, I just realised, with the Polyraptor and the Marauding Raptor. Yeah, that just goes on forever because whenever Polyraptor has damage dealt to it, you make a copy of it. When the copy enters, the Marauding Raptor deals damage. Yeah, so luckily we have a sack outlet. Might be worth including another sack outlet in this deck, just so that we can get out of loops like that. Oh, and that is still counts as an egg, so Atla will trigger there. Get another dinosaur into play. Okay, that is a means of getting rid of the Aetherflux Reservoir. But it's just a case of concentrating on the Forerunners now. And the more Polyraptors come into play, the more each of them gets damage dealt to them, the more Polyraptors we get. Just going to use some floating mana to get rid of the Thrashing Brontodon. And we will go after the Aetherflux Reservoir. Just one less thing for our opponent to sacrifice. And the Thrashing Brontodon is going to die anyway, thanks to all these pings. The Vilis player seems to like something in their hand here, because they're deciding to play it out. How much more damage can we do to stuff here? Yeah, we've got a few more of our opponent's permanents to get rid of before we start killing our stuff. Now, let's attempt to let all of these resolve. And we'll see how many Polyraptors we end up with as well. Big props to our opponent for playing it out. It's cool to show the audience exactly how the deck is going to work. It's difficult with a huge stack like this, but hopefully I've explained it all well enough. When the Silver-clad Ferocidons are dealt damage and go to resolve, each opponent sacks a permanent. And we've got plenty of those on the stack in between all these Polyraptor triggers. Alright, it looks like our opponent has in fact decided to go AFK on us. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and think that they got pulled away for longer than they thought they would. But this is a perfect time to go through exactly what's happening for anyone who still doesn't quite understand. We have Enrage Enablers from things like Marauding Raptor and the Forerunner of the Empire, and what that means is that these creatures deal damage to our creatures and trigger an ability called Enrage. And Enrage is when your creature is dealt damage, something happens. So for instance, we get a copy of the Polyraptor every time it's dealt damage. So if you see all the green things on the stack here, they are all copies of the Polyraptor, which is a 5/5 I think. Yeah, a 5/5 dinosaur. And another Enrage ability, which is the main one really in this instance, the Silver-clad Ferocidons. Whenever they are dealt damage, each opponent sacrifices a permanent, so all of the red things on the stack, for the most part I think, are an instance in which our opponent will have to sacrifice a permanent. And there are a lot of those on the stack. I don't think I've put enough on to have our opponent sacrifice all their permanents, but they've gone AFK anyway, so I'm not going to bother clicking through it anymore. But basically, in this instance, we got to have all of our opponents sacrifice a hell of a lot of their permanents, and therefore we win the game. Not exactly the aim of the deck, but if our opponent decides to use an ill-informed Living Death, then, well, this is something that we can get going apparently, which even I didn't know we could do. It certainly wasn't built into the deck on purpose. Then even if our opponent wipes the board, we can respond with Mirror Entity, turning everything into an egg and getting a bunch of creatures off the top of our library. Might be worth, in instances like this, we could strip our deck of all creatures, so it might be worth going for an Eldrazi that shuffles Graveyard into the library. That's another thing that I cut from the deck. So it's just a case of tweaking the deck now and seeing what works and what doesn't. Anyway, hopefully you all enjoyed this Atla Palani Nest Tender deck. I'm tribalkai on the EDH channel. Thank you for watching.